I fell down the stairs and screamed in pain all night on the cold floor, but my daughter just turned off the light and went to bed, and my son-in-law, coming down for water, glanced at me and said, "Don't be dramatic." A week later, they came back to ask for money again, and I put a folder in front of them that destroyed their lives forever. They thought I would always be their ATM. They were wrong. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I placed the folder on the table between the salt shaker and Jennifer's water glass, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something like relief. "I have good news," I said, smoothing the folder's edge with my thumb. "The bank approved the credit line, $35,000. It took some work, but I got it done for you two." Jennifer glanced at the folder, then back at her plate. She cut into her chicken with deliberate slowness, knife scraping against ceramic. Douglas leaned back in his chair, arms folding across his chest. 35,000. Jennifer set down her fork. "Dad, that's not going to be enough. We need at least twice that to really expand the business properly." The relief started draining from my chest. I'd spent 4 weeks negotiating with the loan officer, providing documentation, explaining my fixed retirement income and the equity in this house. 4 weeks of phone calls and appointments, all to secure what they'd asked for. "You said 30 to 40,000 when we discussed this," I reminded her. "I brought you 35. That's what you needed for the new equipment and the kitchen renovation." Douglas made a sound in his throat, something between a cough and a laugh. "Newton, let's be realistic here." He never called me Dad, not once in 4 years. 35 won't even cover the commercial oven and the ventilation system upgrades. We've run the numbers since then. Since then? The words came out sharper than I intended. That was a month ago. Business situations evolve. Douglas picked up his water glass, examining it as if the conversation bored him. You have to be flexible in entrepreneurship. Adapt or die, as they say. Jennifer reached across and slid the folder back toward me, barely looking at the papers inside. The documents I'd signed that morning, the ones that put my credit rating on the line, pushed aside like junk mail. "Honestly, Newton, you could sell this place and downsize." Douglas gestured around the dining room with his free hand. "You're here alone anyway. A smaller apartment would be practical. Then we'd have real capital to work with." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my chair. "Sell my house? It's just logical." Jennifer's voice carried that reasonable tone she used when explaining obvious things to slow customers. "You don't need 3 floors for one person. This neighborhood's appreciated significantly since you bought in, what was it, the 90s? You'd clear enough to help us properly and still have plenty left over for a nice apartment. Something modern, with maintenance included." I stared at my daughter. 36 years old, sitting in the dining room where I'd taught her to set a table, where we'd celebrated her high school graduation, her college acceptance, her wedding, the same table where she'd cried after her mother's funeral, where I'd held her hand and promised we'd get through it together. "I paid $28,000 for your wedding," I said quietly. $50,000 to start your business. You've lived here 4 years without paying a dime for rent or utilities or food. And this is how you respond? Normal parents help their children, Dad. Jennifer's chin lifted slightly, defiance in the set of her jaw. "You act like we should be grateful for what parents are supposed to do anyway." "Supposed to do?" My hands gripped the table edge. "I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. 2 jobs, Jennifer. I taught day classes and adult education at night, 5 days a week for 4 years. That was your decision." Douglas's voice remained flat, almost conversational. "We didn't ask you to do that. You chose to have a kid. You chose to take on those responsibilities. That's what parenthood means." The chicken on my plate had gone cold. The vegetables glistened under the dining room light, untouched. I'd made this dinner carefully, hoping to celebrate the loan approval together, hoping to see Jennifer smile the way she used to smile when she was younger, when she still looked at me like I mattered. "Besides," Jennifer continued, pushing her chair back slightly, "the house thing makes sense from every angle. You're getting older. What if you fall on these stairs? What if something happens and you're alone on the 2nd floor? A ground-level apartment would be safer." "How thoughtful of you to worry about my safety." The sarcasm tasted bitter in my mouth. Douglas checked his phone, thumb scrolling, not even pretending to engage anymore. Jennifer stood collecting plates, even though we'd barely finished eating. Think about it, Dad. That's all we're asking. Just think about it logically instead of getting emotional. Emotional? As if wanting to keep the home I'd lived in for 27 years. The home where I'd raised my daughter alone after my wife died. The home I'd opened to them when they needed a place to stay temporarily. As if wanting to keep that was merely emotional. I gathered the folder from the table, papers crinkling under my fingers. The bank's logo stared up at me from the letterhead. Official and final. $35,000 in available credit. My signature binding me to monthly payments for the next 5 years. "Where are you going?" Jennifer called after me as I stood. I didn't answer. My chair scraped against the floor, a sharp sound in the quiet room. I walked toward the stairs, folder pressed against my chest like armor, feet heavy on each step. Behind me, the television clicked on. Some show with a laugh track, audience roaring at a punchline I couldn't hear. Douglas said something I didn't catch, and Jennifer responded with a short laugh. They'd already moved on. I closed the bedroom door behind me and stood in the darkness, listening to the muffled sounds of their evening continuing below. The bedroom felt smaller than usual, walls pressing in from all sides. I switched on the lamp beside my bed, yellow light spilling across the desk where I'd graded papers for 30 years. The folder from the bank landed on the desk's surface with a soft thump. Through the floorboards came the television's murmur, occasional laughter. They were watching something together down there, comfortable and unconcerned. I sat in the desk chair, old wood creaking under my weight. A framed photograph caught my attention. Jennifer in her graduation gown, bachelor's degree from Arizona State, literature major like her old man. She was 22 there, her smile wide and genuine, diploma held high. I'd taken that photo from the third row of the stadium, zoomed in with a disposable camera because I couldn't afford anything better back then. She'd thanked me in her speech that day. Not in the official remarks on stage, but afterward, at the restaurant, cheap Italian place off campus. She'd held my hand across the checkered tablecloth and called me her hero. Said she couldn't have done it without me. When did I become just a bank account? I pulled open the desk drawer, rifling through bank statements I'd kept organized in manila folders. Evidence of transfers, printed receipts, documentation of every major expense. The wedding venue deposit, $8,000. The catering, $12,000. The photographer, $4,500. Flowers, dress alterations, the reception hall, the band, $28,000 total. The business loan 2 years ago, $50,000 from my retirement fund, transferred directly to their business account. I'd watched the balance in my savings drop by more than half in a single transaction. 4 years of housing them, feeding them, covering utilities. I'd calculated it once out of curiosity. Roughly $1,500 monthly if I factored in everything. That was $72,000 right there. $113,000 over 4 years, not counting the free housing. They'd asked for each amount. I'd never forced anything on them. I spread the statements across the desk, numbers marching down the pages in neat columns. Proof of everything I'd claimed at dinner, everything Jennifer had dismissed as what parents are supposed to do. My wife would have handled this differently. Sarah had been better at boundaries, better at saying no when people pushed too hard. She died 8 years ago, pancreatic cancer that took her in 6 months, despite every treatment we could afford. Jennifer had been 28 then, living in her own apartment, working at a bookstore while figuring out her career. We'd supported each other through that year, her grief matching mine, Sunday morning pancakes becoming our ritual for processing loss together. Then Douglas appeared, charming, ambitious, full of plans for business ventures and expansion strategies. I'd liked him initially. He'd seemed respectful, asked permission to marry Jennifer the old-fashioned way. The wedding had been elaborate, but I'd wanted Jennifer to have something beautiful after the darkness of her mother's death. "Just for a few months, Dad, while we save for a deposit," Jennifer had said when they'd asked to move in 4 years ago. "We'll be out by summer, I promise." Summer came and went, then another summer, then 2 more. The $50,000 check I'd handed over 2 years ago had been the last time I'd felt appreciated. Jennifer had hugged me tight. Douglas had shaken my hand with what seemed like genuine gratitude. They'd talked about naming the calf after Sarah, honoring her memory, That name never materialized. I stood, paced to the window, 3 steps forward, 3 back. The street outside lay quiet, under sodium vapor lights, suburban peace. A neighbor's porch light glowed across the way. Normal people living normal lives, probably not being asked to liquidate their homes for their children's business ventures. Downstairs, the TV volume increased. Jennifer's laugh rang out, clear and carefree. She was enjoying her show, unbothered by our argument, by my hurt feelings, by the ridiculous demands she'd made. They weren't even bothered. Probably down there planning their next request, figuring out how to squeeze more from the old man. My throat felt dry, mouth cotton thick. I needed water, something to clear my head before trying to sleep, before facing tomorrow and whatever new manipulation they'd attempt. I opened the bedroom door carefully, easing it back to avoid squeaking hinges. The hallway stretched dark toward the stairs, just the faint glow from the living room television below providing any light. I didn't flip the hall switch. The last thing I wanted was another confrontation tonight, another round of being told how selfish I was for wanting to keep my own home. The stairs descended steep and narrow, built in 1998 when the house was constructed. I'd climbed them thousands of times, knew every step by memory. 4th step from the top, my foot came down on something small and hard. Plastic. Rolling. Douglas's nephew had visited yesterday, 5-year-old kid who left toys everywhere. The toy truck shot forward under my weight. My foot went with it, balance gone, body pitching into empty space. I grabbed for the railing, but my hand closed on air. The wall rushed past. My shoulder hit a step, then my hip, momentum carrying me forward and down. Steps slammed into my ribs, my knee, my forearm. The world became a tumbling chaos of pain and impact. I landed at the bottom in a twisted heap, right side crumpled against the tile floor. Pain exploded through my chest, white hot and overwhelming. My leg wouldn't straighten. My arm wouldn't respond to commands. Breathing hurt. Existing hurt. I tried to push myself up with my left arm, but the movement sent agony lancing through my ribs, and I collapsed back onto the cold tile, unable to move. The cold from the tile floor seeped through my shirt and into my bones, but that was nothing compared to the fire in my ribs every time I breathed. I turned my head, a movement that sent fresh waves of pain radiating through my neck and shoulder. Down the short hallway to my left, a strip of yellow light glowed beneath Jennifer and Douglas's bedroom door. The faint murmur of television dialogue filtered through. Some late-night show, voices rising and falling in artificial conversation. They were awake, right there, maybe 30 feet away. "Jennifer!" My voice came out strained, barely recognizing it as my own. "Douglas, I need help down here. I fell." The words echoed in the quiet entryway. I waited, watching that line of light, expecting the door to open, expecting footsteps, expecting the basic human response to someone calling for help. Nothing. The TV continued its muted chatter. No movement, no door opening, no concerned voices asking what happened. I drew a deeper breath, ignoring the stabbing pain it caused. "Please, I'm hurt. I can't get up. Someone help me." Louder this time, projecting as much as my damaged ribs allowed. The sound bounced off the walls. Impossible to miss in the small house. Still nothing. I stared at that strip of light, willing it to brighten as the door opened, willing someone to care that I was lying broken on their floor. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. Time moved strangely, measured in shallow breaths and waves of pain. My right leg throbbed with each heartbeat. My left wrist had swollen to nearly twice its normal size. Then the light went dark. The strip beneath their door disappeared, plunging the hallway into complete blackness, except for the faint gray glow of streetlight through the front window. The TV sound stopped. They'd heard me. They had to have heard me. And they'd turned off their lights and gone to sleep. I propped myself on my left elbow, the less damaged arm, testing whether I could somehow drag myself to safety. My right leg screamed in protest when I tried to bend it. The movement sent lightning bolts through my ribcage, white hot and overwhelming. I managed to shift maybe 2 inches before collapsing back with a small, involuntary cry. The house absorbed the sound and gave nothing back. I let my head rest against the cold tile, cheek pressed to the smooth surface. The ceiling above me was invisible in the darkness. I tried to reconstruct what had happened, tried to make it make sense. The argument at dinner, my rejection of their demands, the credit line they dismissed, the house they wanted me to sell. They thought I was manipulating them. That had to be it. They thought this was some performance, some guilt trip designed to make them feel bad about their perfectly reasonable requests. Except I was actually hurt, actually couldn't move, actually needed help. The darkness pressed down. Minutes crawled past like hours. My body began to stiffen, muscles locking into the awkward position the fall had left me in. The cold from the floor worked its way deeper, making me shiver despite myself, each shudder sending fresh agony through my ribs. I must have dozed briefly, consciousness flickering out and back like a faulty light bulb. When I opened my eyes again, the quality of darkness had changed slightly. Deeper, more complete. The middle of night, when even streetlights seemed dimmer. A sound brought me fully alert, the soft click of a door handle, light footsteps in the hallway. "Help," I tried to say, but my voice came out as a raspy whisper. I cleared my throat, wincing. "Douglas!" He appeared at the edge of my vision, wearing boxer shorts and a t-shirt, bare feet padding past me toward the kitchen. He moved with the casual looseness of someone half asleep, seeking water or a bathroom, following the automatic patterns of middle-of-night routine. "Douglas, please, help me." The words came clearer now, urgent. "I fell down the stairs. I can't stand up. I think something's broken." He opened the refrigerator. Cool light spilled out, illuminating the kitchen in blue-white tones. He pulled out a water bottle, twisted off the cap, and drank deeply, throat working with long gulps. Then he turned, looked directly at me, made eye contact. "Stop being dramatic, Newton." His voice carried the flat annoyance of someone interrupted from sleep by a minor nuisance. "You'll get up when you want to. I have an early morning." He recapped the water bottle and walked back past me, close enough that I could have reached out and grabbed his ankle if my arm had been working properly. "Douglas, wait. I'm not. This isn't." The bedroom door closed with a soft final click. I lay in the renewed darkness, staring at where he'd been standing, where he'd looked right at me on the floor and walked away. He'd seen me. He'd heard me. He'd decided I wasn't worth the inconvenience. The house settled around me, small creaks and shifts of wood and foundation. Outside, a car drove past, headlights briefly sweeping across the ceiling before fading. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen, a low electrical drone. I was alone, completely, absolutely alone. The bedroom door stayed closed, and I lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around me, understanding for the first time that no help was coming. The night stretched endless, marked only by the slow creep of pain from sharp to throbbing to a deep ache that settled into my bones alongside the cold. I couldn't track time anymore. The darkness was complete and unchanging. I tried shifting my weight every so often, searching for a position that hurt less, but the tile floor offered no comfort, and my injuries made every angle equally unbearable. My right leg had gone from screaming pain to a dull, heavy wrongness that worried me more than the initial agony. I drifted, not quite sleeping, but not fully conscious either. Pain and cold kept jerking me back to awareness, just as my mind began to slip away. Somewhere in those dark hours, memories surfaced with strange clarity. 3 years ago, the realtor had called me on a Tuesday afternoon, excited. She'd found buyers willing to offer $520,000 for the house, cash sale, quick closing. I'd been considering it seriously. The place was too big for one person. The stairs were getting harder on my knees, and the money would pad my retirement nicely. I'd mentioned it at dinner that night. Jennifer had burst into tears. "Dad, you can't sell our home." She'd gripped my hand across the table. "This is where Mom lived. It's family. It's all we have left of her." Douglas had nodded solemnly. "We love it here, Newton. It's comfortable. Feels like home to us." I'd called the realtor the next morning and declined the offer. Now, lying on the cold floor in the darkness, I understood. They'd wanted free luxury housing. They'd played on my grief about Sarah, twisted my memories of her into a tool for manipulation. Family home, sentiment, love. They'd wanted to keep living here without paying rent. I shifted slightly, the movement sending fresh pain through my ribs. My left hand, the less damaged one, explored my injuries by touch. My ribs felt tender and swollen on the right side, the flesh hot beneath my fingertips. My legs sat at an angle that couldn't be right, the knee refusing to straighten. My wrist had puffed up like a risen dough. I needed medical help, urgently. Every hour without treatment made things worse. The windows slowly began to show the barest hint of gray. Pre-dawn, that dead hour before sunrise when the world holds its breath. I watched the gray deepen almost imperceptibly, tracking time by the gradual return of light. My mind kept working through the years, reviewing them with the cold clarity that pain and sleeplessness brought. Every financial request had been presented as temporary help. Every sacrifice had been reframed as what parents do. My birthday last year, they'd forgotten it entirely, too busy with inventory issues at the cafe. Christmas, they'd given me a card thanking me for being such a supportive father, then asked if I could cover their equipment lease payment. I'd been reduced to a funding source, a resource to be tapped, and I'd let it happen because I'd loved my daughter and wanted to help her succeed. If I died here, they'd find me tonight and act surprised. The thought crystallized with sharp certainty. They'd discover my body, call for help, perform grief for the paramedics and the neighbors. Nobody would know they'd left me here all night. Nobody would know they'd stepped over me to go to work. If I survived this, everything had to change. Not anger yet, not revenge, just clarity, cold and absolute. I couldn't continue being their ATM. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for people who saw me as an obstacle to liquidate. The gray light strengthened. Shapes emerged from darkness. The banister above me, the coat hooks by the door, the edge of the kitchen archway. Morning was coming. They'd have to leave for the cafe, soon. 7:30 usually, to prep for the 8 o'clock opening. I had assets. The house worth over $500,000 now in this market. My retirement accounts. The credit line I'd just secured. Not wealthy, but comfortable if I stopped hemorrhaging money to ungrateful children. I had options. I just had to survive long enough to use them. Around 7:15, I heard movement from their bedroom. The door opened. Footsteps. Water running in their bathroom. Cabinet doors opening and closing. The ordinary sounds of a morning routine. "Jenny," my voice came out as barely a whisper. I swallowed, tried again. "Jenny, please, help me." She appeared in the hallway, already dressed for work in dark jeans and the cafe, logo shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She glanced at me on the floor, and her expression didn't change from its neutral, slightly annoyed mask. "Dad, enough with the theater already." She walked past me toward the kitchen. "We're running late." Douglas emerged behind her, tucking his wallet into his back pocket. He looked down at me with the same expression he'd worn last night, mild irritation at an inconvenience. "We'll talk about this behavior of yours tonight, Newton." I tried to raise my head, tried to make them see. "I'm not... This isn't theater. I'm hurt." The coffee maker gurgled in the kitchen. Cabinet doors opened and closed. Jennifer reappeared with a travel mug, gathering her purse from the hook by the door. "We really don't have time for this right now." She stepped around my outstretched leg to reach the front door. Douglas grabbed his keys from the hook near my head, the jangling metal, loud and the morning quiet. "Wait," I managed, but the word came out weak and broken. The front door opened. Jennifer walked out first, calling something back about picking up supplies after work. Douglas followed, pulling the door closed behind them. The lock clicked into place with mechanical precision. Their footsteps crossed the porch. Car doors opened and closed. The engine started with a rumble that vibrated through the floor beneath me. The sound faded down the street, growing fainter, then disappearing entirely into the morning traffic. Silence settled over the house like dust. I lay in the growing daylight, alone on the cold tile floor, with something harder than anger settling in my chest, a cold, clear understanding of exactly what needed to happen next. Harold Chen was watering his roses when he noticed the newspaper still lying on my doorstep, and that small deviation from routine saved my life. I heard the knock, first, sharp, insistent raps against wood. Then his voice, muffled through the door. "Newton, you there? Everything okay?" I tried to answer, but my throat was raw from the night's attempts at calling for help. The sound that emerged was barely human, a croaking whisper. "Help!" Silence. Then footsteps approaching closer, the scrape of shoes on the porch. Harold's voice again, nearer now, pressed to the door. Newton, I'm calling for help. Hang on. The sound of numbers being dialed. Harold's voice rising in urgency. My neighbor, Newton Diaz. Elderly man. He's on the floor, says he can't move. Been there all night, I think. Please hurry. I closed my eyes, relief washing through me so powerfully it brought fresh pain to my ribs. Someone had noticed. Someone cared enough to check. The ambulance arrived 14 minutes later. I heard the siren growing louder, then cutting off abruptly outside. Heavy boots on the porch. Harold must have unlocked the door because suddenly there were voices above me, professional and calm. Sir, can you tell me where it hurts? How long have you been down here? A paramedic knelt beside me, young woman with efficient hands, already checking my pulse. Her partner moved around us, opening the medical kit. Since last night, I managed. Fell around midnight, maybe earlier. The examination was swift and thorough. Questions about pain levels, sensation in my extremities, ability to move. They stabilized my leg with practiced movements that still sent white fire shooting through my nervous system. The gurney appeared, and they lifted me with surprising gentleness despite my involuntary groans. The ceiling passed overhead. Harold's worried face appeared in my peripheral vision. You're going to be okay, Newton. I'll check on the house while you're gone. Then I was outside, morning sunlight blinding after the darkness of the floor. The ambulance doors closed, and we were moving. Banner University Medical Center Phoenix materialized in fragments. Bright lights, squeaking wheels, multiple voices talking over me. They cut away my clothes. Ice packs appeared. An X-ray machine hummed and clicked. A doctor appeared, pointing at images on a screen where white lines fractured through gray bones. 3 broken ribs here, here, and here. Fractured tibia. Clean break, fortunately. This wrist is badly sprained, but not fractured. We'll cast the leg, wrap the ribs, keep you for observation. You're lucky, Mr. Diaz. 9 hours on a hard floor with these injuries could have resulted in complications. Internal bleeding, pneumonia, worse. Lucky. The word felt absurd, but I understood what he meant. I was alive. I was being treated. It could have been so much worse. They admitted me, wheeled me to a room on the 4th floor. White walls, a window showing Phoenix sprawling under August heat, machines beeping steadily beside the bed. Medication dulled the pain to a manageable throb. Around 11 in the morning, a nurse came to update my chart. We've contacted your emergency contact, your daughter, Jennifer. She said she'd be here when she could. When she could. Not immediately. Not dropping everything. When convenient. The afternoon crawled past. Lunch arrived on a tray. I couldn't eat much. My body felt simultaneously numb from medication and screaming from deeper aches the drugs couldn't touch. I dozed fitfully, waking at sounds in the hallway, always half expecting Jennifer's voice. At 2:30, she appeared. I knew before she spoke, before she even fully entered the room, that nothing had changed in her. She stood in the doorway wearing her caff. Shirt, hair pulled back practically, purse clutched tight against her side. Her face carried the expression of someone dealing with an inconvenience, stressed, slightly annoyed, performing concern rather than feeling it. Dad, she approached the bed but didn't touch me, maintaining a careful distance. Why did you create such a scene? You could have just waited until we got home from work. I stared at her, studied her face, looking for some sign of the daughter I'd raised, the girl who'd held my hand at her mother's funeral, who'd called me her hero at graduation. She wasn't there. I couldn't move, I said quietly. I called for you. Multiple times. You heard me. We thought... She shifted her weight, arms crossing defensively. We thought you were just trying to get attention. You were upset about dinner, and then suddenly you're calling for help? It seemed strategic. Strategic. She thought I'd staged a fall down the stairs, broken my ribs and leg, spent 9 hours in agony on a cold floor, all to win an argument about money. The doctor entered before I could respond, tablet in hand, already speaking. Your father could have developed internal bleeding. 9 hours without medical attention with these injuries was extremely dangerous, potentially life-threatening. Jennifer's expression flickered, not to concern but to defensiveness. We thought he was just trying to get attention. He does that sometimes. The lie landed between us. Naked, and obvious. I'd never manipulated her for attention, never staged dramatics. But in her mind, my resistance to being liquidated constituted manipulation. The doctor glanced at me, then back at Jennifer, something shifting in his professional demeanor. I see. Well, he's stable now. We'll keep him through tomorrow, then discharge him with mobility assistance and pain management. He left. Jennifer remained standing at distance, neither approaching the bed nor leaving entirely, waiting for something. Permission to go, maybe. Or checking whether I'd be difficult about this, whether I'd make another scene. I looked at her, really looked at her, saw what she'd become, or perhaps what she'd always been, and I'd refused to see. Someone who valued money over safety, convenience over compassion, who could dismiss genuine suffering as theater. Leave, I said quietly. I don't want you here right now. Something like relief crossed her face. She'd been waiting for that, permission to go, freedom from the obligation of pretending to care. I'll check on you when you're home, she offered, already turning toward the door. Don't bother. She paused, hand on the doorframe, but didn't turn back. You're being unreasonable. Leave, please. The door clicked shut behind her, and I lay in the quiet hospital room watching the afternoon light shift across the white walls, understanding with perfect clarity that the daughter I'd raised no longer existed, if she ever had. Harold's hand on my elbow was steady as I maneuvered through the doorway, the crutches awkward against my ribs, but I barely felt the discomfort. My mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating the hours I'd have alone before they returned from work. 3 days in the hospital had given me time to think, time to plan, time to accept what I'd been avoiding for years. Newton, you call me if you need anything. Anything at all. Harold settled the wheelchair in the living room, adjusting it so I could reach it easily from the couch. I'm right next door. Don't try to do too much too soon. I appreciate everything, Harold. Really. I meant it. This man, barely more than a casual neighbor before this week, had shown me more genuine concern than my own family. He patted my shoulder and left, pulling the door closed gently behind him. The house felt different. Quiet, yes, but also mine again in a way it hadn't been for 4 years. I looked around the living room, boxes of calf, supplies stacked against one wall, Jennifer's jacket draped over a chair, Douglas's running shoes by the door, evidence of their occupation, their assumption of ownership. Not anymore. I made my way slowly to the den, a ground-floor room I hadn't used much since they'd commandeered it for storage. More boxes lined the walls, industrial mixing bowls, commercial baking supplies, inventory sheets. I used one crutch to nudge a stack aside, clearing space to reach the desk. My laptop sat where I'd left it weeks ago, dusty but functional. I powered it on, settled carefully into the desk chair, and opened a browser. The search terms came easily. Phoenix estate planning attorney, property trust lawyer, elder law specialist. Results populated the screen. I scrolled through them methodically, reading reviews, studying credentials. Some firms were too large, impersonal. Others specialized in areas I didn't need. I wanted someone thorough, experienced, someone who understood the specific situation of protecting assets from entitled family members. Richard Caldwell and Associates appeared third in the search results. I clicked through to their website. Professional photos, credentials clearly displayed. Caldwell himself had practiced for 32 years, specializing in revocable living trusts, estate planning, elder law, property transfer. The reviews caught my attention. Thorough and protective. Clear guidance through complex family situations. Helped me establish boundaries I should have set years ago. That last one resonated. Their services page listed exactly what I needed. Trust establishment, property protection, financial planning for senior independence. They even had elder abuse consultation listed, though I wasn't ready to frame it that way yet. Not legally, not publicly, but privately? I knew what had happened to me. I found their online consultation form and began filling it out. Name, age, 64. Brief description of needs, estate planning, property trust establishment, financial independence strategies. The confirmation appeared immediately. Consultation scheduled August 20th, 10 a.m. Richard Caldwell will meet with you personally. Please bring relevant financial documents and property information. Tomorrow. I had until tomorrow to gather everything I needed. Bank statements, property deed, retirement account information, documentation of all money I'd given Jennifer and Douglas over the years. Evidence. I closed the laptop and sat back, wincing as the movement pulled at my wrapped ribs. The afternoon light slanted through the window, warm and dusty. The house ticked and settled around me, familiar sounds I'd heard for 27 years. Around 6:30 I heard their car in the driveway. The engine sound was distinctive, Douglas's aging sedan with its rattling exhaust. I closed the laptop deliberately and wheeled myself to the living room, positioning the chair casually near the couch, arranging my expression into neutral calm. The front door opened. Jennifer entered first, carrying paper bags that smelled of lemongrass and basil, Thai food from the restaurant near their cafe. "Dad, I brought dinner. Thought you might not feel like cooking." Her voice carried forced brightness, like she'd practiced the words in the car. "How are you feeling? Better, I hope?" Douglas followed, loosening his tie, barely glancing my direction before dropping onto the couch and pulling out his phone. "Fine," I said. "Thank you for the food." Jennifer unpacked containers on the coffee table, arranging them with exaggerated care. Pad Thai, spring rolls, curry. She opened cabinets, retrieved plates, talking the whole time about their day at the cafe. Some problem with the supplier, how busy lunch service had been. I let her talk, watched her perform this ritual of normalcy, this pretense that nothing had changed between us. Finally, inevitably, she arrived at her real purpose. "So about that money you promised, the $35,000. She sat on the couch edge, leaning forward. "We really need it soon. Suppliers are asking, and we have to pay by the end of the month or they'll cut us off." Douglas looked up from his phone. "We can't wait around, Newton. Business doesn't operate on maybe later. We need to know, are you transferring that money or not?" I met his eyes steadily, let the silence stretch, counted 3 heartbeats before responding. "We'll discuss financial matters later." My voice remained level, unremarkable. "I'm still recovering." "But," Jennifer started, "I need to focus on my health right now." Douglas's jaw tightened. Jennifer's mouth opened, closed again. They exchanged a glance, confusion beginning to creep in at the edges, uncertainty about how to respond to resistance they hadn't expected. I simply reached for my water glass and said nothing more, letting the silence do my work for me. Richard Caldwell's office occupied the 7th floor of a glass building downtown, and the morning sun through the windows was bright enough that I barely noticed the ache in my ribs as I lowered myself into the chair across from his desk. The receptionist had offered assistance when I'd maneuvered through the door on crutches, but I declined politely. I wanted to do this myself, arrive under my own power, begin this next phase with whatever dignity I could maintain. Caldwell was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 50s, graying at the temples but with sharp eyes that tracked every detail. He waited until I'd settled before speaking. "Mr. Diaz, thank you for coming in. I've reviewed the information from your consultation request. Please tell me what's happened, in your own words." I opened the folder I'd prepared, medical records from Banner University, the timeline I'd written out in careful detail, bank statements showing every transfer to Jennifer and Douglas over the past 4 years. I talked for 20 minutes, the dinner argument about selling my house, the fall, calling for help and being ignored, 9 hours on the floor, Douglas seeing me and walking away, Jennifer and Douglas stepping over me to go to work, the hospital, Jennifer's dismissal of my injuries as theater. Caldwell took notes on a legal pad, occasionally looking up to ask clarifying questions. When I finished, he set down his pen and leaned back. "Mr. Diaz, what happened to you was unconscionable." His voice remained professional, but something in his eyes had hardened. "Legally, we have several options. The house is yours. You can control who benefits from it. The loan guarantorship can be revoked, and they're essentially tenants without a lease." "I want all 3, I said. "The trust, revoking the loan guarantee, and the rental agreement, or eviction notice if they refuse. How quickly can this happen?" "Trust documents take about 3 days to properly draft and execute. The loan revocation is immediate once you notify the bank in writing. The eviction notice requires 30 days under Arizona law." He pulled up a document on his computer, turned the screen so I could see. A revocable living trust transfers your house into the trust structure. You remain the trustee with full control during your lifetime, but the property itself is no longer part of your personal estate. You can designate who benefits after your death, a charity, another relative, anyone you choose. It completely eliminates any automatic inheritance claim. And the loan? You co-signed a $75,000 business loan 2 years ago, correct? As guarantor, you have the legal right to revoke that guarantee. The bank will contact the primary borrowers and require either new collateral or partial payment to maintain the loan. I thought of Jennifer and Douglas at their cafe, going through their morning routine, expecting the $35,000 I'd secured, having no idea what was coming. Do it, I said. All of it. The next 3 days moved with bureaucratic precision. Caldwell's office prepared documents. Patricia Gomez, a notary who specialized in elder law financial consulting, met with me twice to review the implications of each decision. August 20th, I signed the trust papers, watching my signature flow across page after page. Patricia's notary seal appeared beside each one, official and permanent. August 21st, more signatures. The rental agreement establishing market rate at $2,400 monthly, or alternatively, the 30-day eviction notice if they refused payment. Patricia explained Arizona's Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, the protections it gave me as property owner. August 22nd, the final documents. Now, I drafted the letter to the bank on Caldwell's letterhead template, stating clearly that I was revoking my guarantorship per my legal right under the loan agreement. Printed it, signed it, scanned and emailed it with Caldwell copied on the message. My finger hovered over the send button for perhaps 3 seconds. Then I clicked it, and the message disappeared into the electronic void, irreversible and absolute. The phone rang the next afternoon, August 23rd. The number showed First National Bank of Arizona. Mr. Diaz, this is Robert Chen from First National. We've received your revocation notice. The banker's voice carried professional neutrality with an undercurrent of surprise. We'll need to contact the borrowers immediately for new collateral or partial payment. This is quite unusual timing. I understand, I said. It's necessary. We're requiring $20,000 by September 10th, or we'll need to discuss restructuring terms. I wanted to confirm you're certain about this decision. Completely certain. Very well. We'll be in touch with the borrowers today. After he hung up, I sat at my desk watching the afternoon shadows lengthen across the street outside my window. By now, they would have received the call. By now, Jennifer would be staring at her phone. Douglas's face would be reddening with that particular shade of anger I'd seen at dinner. By now, they were finally understanding their situation had changed. I pulled the folder of completed documents toward me, organized and tabbed. Trust papers, bank revocation confirmation, rental notice, and one more document I'd had Patricia notarize yesterday, Harold Chen's statement, written and signed, describing how he'd found me after 9 hours on the floor, what I'd told him about being ignored by my family, the condition I'd been in, evidence, documentation, everything prepared. Tomorrow or the next day, they'd come to me. They'd demand explanations, try to manipulate, probably threaten, and I'd be ready with facts and legal authority they couldn't argue against. I closed the folder and set it in the top drawer of my desk, where I could reach it easily. The waiting was almost over. They were waiting when I finished dinner, sitting together on the couch with that unified tension that meant they'd rehearsed this conversation at the cafe. And Jennifer's voice was carefully measured when she said they needed to talk about money. I'd been expecting this, had known it would come tonight, maybe tomorrow, at latest. The bank would have called them yesterday. They'd spent 24 hours panicking, searching for solutions, finally accepting they needed to approach me. Of course, I said. Let's talk. Douglas leaned forward, elbows on knees, Jennifer's hands twisted together in her lap. Dad, we need your help. Jennifer's tone hit that earnest note she used when requesting favors. $35,000 for the suppliers and $20,000 for the bank. You could take a home equity loan. You've always helped us before. This is really important. $55,000, more than I'd given them for their wedding, more than their business startup, and delivered as if it were reasonable, as if I were obligated. I set my fork down, reached for my crutches, and pushed myself to standing. They watched as I moved slowly toward my office, neither offering help nor asking what I was doing. I returned carrying the folder. "Instead of money," I said, settling back into my chair, "I have something for you. Documents you should read carefully." I placed the folder on the coffee table between us and opened it with deliberate precision. Removed the first document and slid it across to Jennifer. She picked it up, eyes scanning the legal text. Her brow furrowed. She passed it to Douglas, who read faster, his jaw tightening with each paragraph. "What is this?" Jennifer's voice had gone thin. "Irrevocable living trust. The house is no longer in my personal estate. It's held in trust, with me as lifetime beneficiary and trustee. Notice the beneficiary designation section. That's who receives the property after my death." Douglas flipped to that page. His face went pale, then red. "This says, to be determined. You're cutting Jennifer out of her inheritance?" "I'm protecting my assets," I corrected. "The house goes where I decide it goes, not automatically to people who see me as an ATM. I produced the second document, slid it across. Jennifer grabbed it this time. "This is—" "You revoked the loan guarantee? You're the reason the bank called." "The guarantorship was a liability I chose to eliminate. The bank requires new collateral or $20,000 by September 10th. That's between you and them now." "You can't do this!" Douglas surged to his feet, voice rising. "You're obligated to help your family. This house should go to Jennifer. She's your daughter." I didn't flinch, didn't lean back, just looked up at him calmly and produced the third document. Arizona Residential Landlord and Tenant Act requires 30 days' notice for eviction. Since you have no written lease and pay no rent, you're month-to-month tenants at will. This notice establishes market rate rent at $2,400 monthly, beginning September 1st. You can pay or you can leave. The document landed on top of the others. Douglas stared at it, then at me. Jennifer made a small sound in her throat. "You're charging us rent? To live in your house?" "My trust's house," I corrected. "And yes, $2,400 is actually below market for a property this size in this neighborhood. You've been living here free for 4 years, while I paid all utilities, maintenance, and property taxes. That ends September 1st. Douglas took a step toward me. His hands had curled into fists. "We'll sue you. There are laws about this. You can't just cut off your daughter like this. A court will—" I reached into the folder one more time, pulled out the fourth document, and held it up where he could see Harold Chen's signature, Patricia Gomez's notary seal. "By all means, take me to court. Then everyone, the judge, your friends, your customers, will hear how you left a 64-year-old man with broken bones on the floor all night, how you stepped over him in the morning to go to work, how you told the hospital it was theater." I set the document on the table with the others. Medical records from Banner University were clipped behind it, X-rays showing the fracture lines, doctor's notes about the 9 hours without treatment, assessment of life-threatening risk. Harold Chen found me at 8:20 in the morning. This statement describes my condition, what I told him, how long I'd been there. The medical records confirm everything. So yes, Douglas, let's go to court. Let's have that conversation publicly. I'm sure you're CAF. Customers would love to hear how you treat elderly family members. Douglas stood frozen mid-advance. The color drained from his face. Jennifer's voice came out barely above a whisper. "We thought you were faking, Dad, trying to get attention after our argument. We didn't know you were really hurt. You saw me." I kept my voice level, factual. "Douglas, you came out for water at 1 in the morning. You looked directly at me lying on the floor and told me to stop being dramatic. Jennifer, you saw me in the morning. You stepped around my leg to reach the front door. You didn't care enough to check whether I was hurt. You cared about getting to work on time." She opened her mouth, closed it. No words came. "I owe nothing," I continued, "to people who left me lying on the floor for 9 hours. You heard me call for help. You saw me there helpless. You chose to ignore it. Those are facts. Everything else is just your attempt to justify the unjustifiable." Douglas sank back onto the couch slowly, the fight draining from his posture. Jennifer stared at the documents spread across the table, like evidence at a crime scene. Trust papers, bank letters, rental notice, witness statements, medical records. Everything documented, everything legal, everything final. You have until September 1st to decide about the rent, I said quietly. If you refuse, the eviction notice gives you 30 days to vacate. Either way, you're no longer living here free. Neither of them moved, neither spoke. They finally understood that everything had changed, and there was nothing they could do to change it back. The argument started the next evening, Jennifer's voice rising through the walls of their bedroom, sharp with accusation, and Douglas's answering in defensive bursts. And I sat in my reading chair listening to their marriage fracture under the weight of consequences they'd brought on themselves. This is your fault. You were rude to him. You pushed him too far. If you'd just been patient, we wouldn't be in this mess. He's your father. You should have maintained the relationship. You let him walk all over us with these insane demands. I closed my book, let the voices wash over me for a moment, then deliberately opened it again and continued reading. Their crisis. Their problem. Not mine to solve. The next 3 days brought a parade of desperation I observed from a distance. August 26th, I found Jennifer at the kitchen table, surrounded by bank statements and bills, calculator in hand, phone pressed to her ear. Please, there must be something. We only need $20,000. We have a business. We have income. Her voice carried false confidence that crumbled as she listened to the response. No? Not even with our equipment as collateral? I understand. Thank you anyway. She made 7 more calls that morning. Each one ended the same way. Polite rejections, doors closing one after another. Without Newton's guarantorship backing them, they had nothing banks wanted. I watched from the doorway, unseen. Her posture slumped further with each failed attempt. August 27th brought a new crisis. I heard Jennifer's frustrated phone conversation with the supplier. But we've been customers for 2 years. Can't you extend terms just this once? We have money coming. What do you mean you can't deliver without payment? Our contract says, I see. Yes, I understand. By the 28th, the business was imploding. I overheard Jennifer explaining to Douglas that without fresh ingredients, they couldn't make half their menu items. Customers were complaining. Revenue was dropping. Everything was cascading. That evening, I retrieved the mail and found a certified letter addressed to them. First National Bank of Arizona, return address printed in official blue. I placed it on the kitchen counter, unopened, and went to my room. Later, I heard Jennifer's stifled cry. Then Douglas's voice, sharp and profane, cursing Newton's name, the bank, their luck, everything and everyone. The August 29th letter must have been the acceleration notice. Pay $20,000 by September 10th, or the entire balance would come due immediately. $55,000 they didn't have. The end of everything they'd built on my money and my guarantees. I moved through the house maintaining my routines, made my meals, read my books, rested when my ribs ached. The eye of their storm, calm while chaos swirled around me. I wasn't enjoying their suffering. That would have made me cruel, and I'd worked too hard to maintain dignity to surrender it now. But I wasn't helping either. These were natural consequences of their choices, their financial irresponsibility, their contempt. I was simply letting reality teach the lessons I'd failed to teach them. Through the walls at night, I heard their arguments intensifying. Jennifer blaming Douglas, Douglas blaming Jennifer. Neither taking full responsibility, both pointing fingers. Their marriage wasn't breaking cleanly. It was tearing apart slowly, threads snapping one by one under tension. August 30th, around 7 in the evening, a soft knock came at my bedroom door. Yes? Dad, can I come in? Jennifer's voice. Alone. No Douglas. Come in. She entered slowly, closing the door behind her. Her face was blotchy from crying. Recent tears, not makeup-smeared manipulation. She sat heavily in the chair across from where I'd been reading, wringing her hands in her lap. For perhaps 30 seconds, she said nothing. Just sat there, visibly gathering courage or composure or both. Dad, please. The words came out broken. We're going to lose everything. The business, our savings, everything we built. I know we were wrong, but please, help us. Real tears now. Genuine desperation, not performance. The first authentic emotion I'd seen from her since the hospital. I set my book aside and looked at her directly. You lost my trust and respect, I said quietly. There will be no money. You have 2 options. Pay the rent and live here while you figure out your situation or find somewhere else to stay. Those are your choices. But we can't. The 20,000? Figure it out yourselves. Sell equipment. Borrow from someone else. Close the business. Find jobs. Whatever adults do when they face financial problems. But you won't be using me as a solution anymore. She stared at me, tears still falling, searching my face for some crack in the armor, some weakness she could exploit. She found none. I'm sorry, she whispered. I hope you are. But sorry doesn't undo what happened. Sorry doesn't give me back those 9 hours on the floor. Sorry doesn't erase you stepping over me to go to work. She stood slowly, defeat visible in every line of her body, and walked to the door without looking back. And I watched her go, knowing that sympathy wasn't the same as rescue, and that the only way forward required them to find it themselves. They sold the equipment the next day, the industrial mixer, the commercial ovens, the display cases that had represented their dreams. And I learned about it only when Jennifer slipped an envelope under my bedroom door on the 1st of September, containing a check for $2,400, with rent written in the memo line. I held it for a long moment, the first payment they'd ever made to live in my house. 4 years late, but there it was. I deposited it without fanfare. The first week of September brought swift changes. Douglas found work managing someone else's cafe, across town, swallowing whatever pride required him to take orders instead of give them. Jennifer landed an administrative position at a medical office. Combined, they made enough to cover the rent and basic expenses, but their lifestyle had collapsed into something barely recognizable from the comfortable existence they'd enjoyed on my dime. They closed the cafe, bakery officially on September 7th, liquidated inventory, paid the bank their $20,000 scraped together from equipment sales and a humiliating loan from Douglas's relatives. The business they'd built with my $50,000 and 2 years of effort simply ceased to exist. Their marriage survived, but barely. I heard less arguing as September progressed, but the silence between them sounded heavier than their earlier fights. They were in couples therapy, Jennifer mentioned once in passing, trying to rebuild something they'd let crack under the weight of entitlement and failure. September 15th, early evening, Jennifer knocked on my living room doorframe. I looked up from my book. Can we talk? I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat, maintaining the physical distance, no longer presuming closeness was her right. She folded her hands in her lap and looked directly at me, and I saw something different in her face. Not manipulation, not performance. Something raw. Dad, I don't know if I deserve your forgiveness. The words came carefully, like she'd rehearsed them but was still uncertain. We were terrible. I was terrible. You gave me everything, and I took it for granted. She paused, swallowed hard. That night, when you were on the floor, I'm ashamed to even think about it. I heard you. I convinced myself you were trying to manipulate us, make us feel guilty about the argument. I didn't want to admit you were really hurt, because then I'd have to face how selfish we were being. How selfish I was being. Her voice cracked slightly. I stepped over you to leave for work. I saw you lying there, and I chose the cafe, over-checking if my father was okay. I'm so sorry, Dad. For all of it. For the money. For taking your help for granted. For that night. For everything. I let the silence sit between us. Several seconds passed. She didn't rush to fill it, didn't deflect, just waited. Jenny, I said finally, I don't know if I can forgive you right now. What happened hurt me deeply, physically and otherwise. But you are my daughter. Maybe, with time, we can rebuild something. But our relationship has to be different going forward. It needs to be built on mutual respect, not obligation or manipulation. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I understand. I'll show you, not just tell you, however long it takes. That's all I ask. She stood, wiped her eyes, and left quietly. No demands, no expectations, just acceptance. Douglas came the next day, awkward and brief. Newton, I was wrong. How I treated you was wrong. I'm sorry. Less elaborate than Jennifer's apology, but his tone suggested he meant it. I nodded acknowledgement. We'd never been close. We wouldn't become close now, but perhaps we could be civil. By late September, they'd moved to a small apartment in Tempe. 2 bedrooms, older building, nothing like the spacious house they'd occupied for 4 years. They paid their own utilities now, bought their own groceries, manage their own lives. Jennifer called every few days, asked how I was feeling, offered to help with groceries or errands, small gestures, consistently delivered. Not grand declarations, just steady proof of change. I'd modified the trust in consultation with Richard Caldwell. Jennifer could potentially inherit again, but only after demonstrating sustained change over multiple years. Conditional, earned, not automatic. My cast came off mid-September. Physical therapy restored my mobility. By the month's end, I moved through my house without crutches, without pain, without the physical reminders of that night. I joined a book club at the community center. 8 retirees meeting weekly to discuss classic literature. Last Thursday, we debated Hemingway's notion of grace under pressure, and I'd found myself laughing at someone's analysis, genuinely engaged in a way I hadn't been in years. Harold Chen and I met for coffee twice a week now. Easy conversation between 2 men who understood boundaries and respect. He'd become a real friend, not just the neighbor who'd saved my life. "You know," I told him over coffee one Wednesday afternoon, "you saved my life that morning. But what happened after? The legal work, the boundaries, that saved something else. I got my dignity back, my autonomy. Maybe that's what I needed all along." Harold smiled. Sometimes the hardest thing's learning when to help and when to let people face their own consequences. On the last Saturday of September, Jennifer came by as scheduled, helped me organize the garage without being asked, no complaints about the work. We had lunch together, sandwiches at the kitchen table, conversation flowing more naturally than it had in years. She left at 3, gave me a brief hug at the door. "See you next week, Dad." "See you next week, Jenny." I watched her drive away, then returned to my house. My space, truly mine again in ways it hadn't been since she and Douglas moved in. The afternoon light slanted through the windows as I settled into my reading chair. On my desk, the trust documents lay filed and organized, future secured on my terms. On the bookshelf, a photo of young Jennifer at her college graduation still held its place, acknowledging the past without being trapped by it. I marked her next Saturday visit on the calendar. Just a small notation, nothing elaborate. The house was quiet, orderly, mine. I opened my book and began reading, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt genuinely at peace, not because I'd won some battle, but because I'd finally, at 64 years old, learned to value myself enough to demand respect. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.